I'm very pleased to introduce Danielle Legros George. She's the author of 3 collections of poetry, Maroon, The Dear Remote Nearness of You, and the chapbook Letters from Congo. She edited City of Notions, an anthology of contemporary Boston poems, and is published in such magazines as Agni, the American Poetry Review, the Cambridge Writer, Callaloo, and Consequence. Her awards include the Sheila Motten Book Prize from the New England Poetry Club, the Penn New England Discovery Award, and a fellowship from the Massachusetts Cultural Council. From 2015 until just last week, she served as Boston's second poet laureate, and currently she leads us. Section 2 of The Dear Remote Nearness of You begins with an epigraph from the great Marxist, 17 years imprisoned Turkish poet Nazım Hikmet. Quote, "Living is no joke." That's an apt and interesting and maybe even curious quotation. It's apt because for Danielle's poems, as for Hikmet's, quote from Danielle, expression is the antidote to repression. The lyric, and her poems are very lyrical, taps into, as it must, the personal. And the personal inevitably incites the political. The epigraph from Hikmet is interesting and maybe even curious because The Dear Remote Nearness of You has so much wit, gives so much pleasure from the sheer play of its language. It's full of what Seamus Heaney called the music of what happens. But the deeper we read into this book, the more we recall that wit used to mean understanding, consciousness, and even conscience. That last quality of mind and heart, found on nearly every page, brings us back to Hikmet. Since Danielle's poetry, to paraphrase Hikmet's late masterpiece, keeps finding things it didn't know it loved. Finding loved things can often mean facing unspeakable suffering. How does a country bury its too hastily buried dead, asks the beautifully grave poem In the Next Town about Haiti's catastrophic earthquake of 2010. Or, as in Intersection, also about the disaster, empathic and accurate expression might need to push language to the very brink of articulation. This is where I get all sort of close readery. 11 repeated words deployed over 18 feverishly enjammed and end-stopped lines, creating an unsettlement I can only call seismic. Hikmet wrote that, quote, "However and wherever we are, we must live as if one never dies. That is, we must live at full imaginative tilt." Danielle knows what he knows when she concedes that life amounts in large part to whatever's grinding you to red dust, yet immediately beforehand praises with her characteristic perfect pitch the lyrical yes to all that needs a yes to. So, yes, Danielle Legros George.
Thank you, Stephen. Only. Nature hides the most beautiful design, the norm, the anomaly, the rare, the rarest, which is to say, the only. And aren't we each twin even, only? Still life with orbs. Between the thing and the name of it is a world, and a world behind this world. There is my mask placed on the table. There is the wooden table and the space beneath it. There is an orange on the floor when it should be on the table in the yellow basket meant for oranges, but which contains a cat licking one front paw. What do cats know of oranges? What do birds know of water unless they plunge their beaks into it, breaking some poor fish's sleep? What do fish know of birds except the slash of bill, the sudden flash, the stop? Some of the poems I write take up racism and race, or their responses to racism, so I'll read some of them. If this reading were a syllabus, now would be the moment of the trigger warning. If one employs trigger warnings, there's this big debate raging about the use of trigger warnings. Poem from the real world. Excuse me. There's a real world moment there. Poem from the real world. I'm on Dorchester Ave when I hear it. Nigger. It is September 28th, 2004. And I haven't heard the word used this way in so long, I am for some seconds stunned and simultaneously amused, in the way an archaeologist might be, coming upon the grotto of some long extinct tribe she's been studying for years to discover their swear words etched in the cave. And almost in the same moment, I say to myself, he's not talking to me, and keep walking. It's a temperate, lovely day. Indian summer asterisked for further study. Blustery, and again it comes, nigger. And nigger comes creeping, fettered, measured, raped and lynched, reconstructed, redlined, incarcerated, deconstructed, resurrected. I would have preferred negress, more charming and belletristic, more gendered, but past the purpose and grasp of the wielder of nigger. But I digress and return to the task of inscription with what is available to me, that is, language. There is no poetry here because there is no poetry here. I'm recording this to remind myself this wasn't an odd dream, the result of having watched one too many PBS documentaries on civil rights and race relations in the United States, of imagining a young Linda Brown crossing the train switchyard to school, Topeka, Kansas, 1952. I am recording this to remind myself that this did indeed happen on September 28th, 2004, in Boston, beloved Boston, Massachusetts, the US of A. We eat cold eels and think distant thoughts. We eat cold eels and think distant thoughts, said American boxer Jack Johnson, glistening like a fish, to the newsman who asked him why white women were drawn to black men like him. What is it like to eat cold eels and think distant thoughts? What is it like to be a black man who eats cold eels and thinks distant thoughts? What is it like to be a black man who thinks to say, we eat cold eels and think distant thoughts, to a white reporter, early 1900s America, who wants to reduce him to meat, to red, to sexual? Once, in the Chicago Aquarium, a long time ago, I met an eel I was told by the label on his large tank weighed 53 pounds and was 100 years old. It looked at me with such a fierce intelligence through the glass and silty water of its address. Its gray, bald head, almost human, its two lidless eyes, its small nose holes, and instead of a body below its head, no body, but a tail of fluid form, one great muscle behind ears that were not ears, but also holes. Its whole body beating a slow, chilled rhythm that kept it afloat. And a cool terror shot through me as it watched me watch it, as it followed me through the liquid wall that split our worlds and separated our species. A few years ago, I was asked to write some poems on the history of the Old Manse, which is a house in Concord, Massachusetts, long associated with the transcendentalist movement of the early 19th century. Some consider it the Second American Revolution, the revolution of ideas, a move away from European models, European influence, an attempt to articulate a unique American philosophy, literature, politics. So people like Emerson, Hawthorne and his wife Sophia, Margaret Fuller and Thoreau were hanging out and living at the Old Manse and considering such ideas as human striving and self-reliance, these great notions we've come to associate with American identity. So fast forward to the 21st century, and people like me and other writers are looking at the issues left out of the official narratives associated with that moment, with Concord and the house, like generations of enslaved Africans and African Americans, Native Americans who worked in that house, in the Old Manse, and in the gardens, contemporary black community of Concord, Massachusetts, the folks who lived around Walden Pond and who created these spaces that have become the green spaces that are around Walden Pond today. So in my research for this project of these missing narratives, I was routing about the archives and came across a document that stopped me. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. So this document stopped me. It was a 1740 bill of sale housed in the Concord Free Library. It's also there's also a copy in the Robbins House, the African American Historic House in Concord. So this poem consists of two parts. The first of which is the bill of sale verbatim, and the second is a sort of response. And the bill of sale contains like a crossed out material, so I'll indicate that. There's the word, and then it's been crossed out, so I'll indicate that with this gesture. And then my response contains some words that have been laid down and then also crossed out by me. So. Poem as bill of sale and site of stifled rage and sorrow. Bill of sale for enslaved 2-year-old girl, Violet. Name crossed out and changed to Nancy. Know all men by these presents that I, William Wilson of Concord, in the county of Middlesex of New England, for the sum of 30 pounds to me secured and paid by Sarah Melvin of said Concord, widow, do hereby fully and absolutely sell, grant, convey, and pass over to said Sarah Melvin, her heirs and assigns forever, a certain Negro girl being a slave about 2 years of age called Violet. Nancy, to be to her, her heirs and assigns for her and their use and service during the said Negro girl's natural life. Hereby, for myself, heirs, executors, and administrators, warranting her, said Negro girl, to her, said Sarah Melvin, her heirs and assigns from the legal claims or demands of any person. Witness my hand and seal, April 22nd, A.D., 1740. Witnesses, Thomas Jones, Thomas Miles, William Wilson. Bill of sale for enslaved 2-year-old girl, baby Violet. Name sustained and repeated many times. Violet, 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 Violet. Witness my hand and seal the day she is born. Witnesses, mother, father, midwife who brings this child into the world. I'm going to switch gears and finish with two poems. It's actually a translation and it's original. I've been translating the work of a woman named Ida Faubert. She was born in Haiti at the turn of the 20th century. Her father was a Haitian president, a black man. Her mother was a French white woman. Her father was given a coup d'etat, and so the family fled to France. And little Ida, was educated by her mother's family in convent school. She got a really great education, and was really active in Belle Époque France, the Roaring Twenties of France, and she was a child of privilege. She would go back to, as a young woman, go back to Port-au-Prince and scandalize polite society. And then she was hanging out with artists on the left bank in Paris. There's a literary scholar who argues that she was writing coded love poems to women, so I think there's this added interesting fact about her poetry. I consider her a literary foremother, being Haitian myself. And she writes these kind of beautiful, strange poems in a sort of a romantic style, which was anachronistic for the time she was living. And poems about, they're never like fully embodied, they're about elbows and knees and so on. And I think that in some ways she was like maybe pushing against representations of black women in the European imagination. So I'm reading this, I guess, because I wanted to bring this work to you, and also just to underscore the notion of translation. I know that there's been some translation work that has taken place in this program, so I hope to see more of that take place. So I'm going to subject you to the sonorous French original, and then read to you my English translation. Soir tropical. Le soir est lumineux, le soir est tendre et beau. Le soleil s'est éteint, la lune est sur les roses. Une langueur pénètre au cœur même des choses. Les grands palmiers noirs rêvent au bord de l'eau. Les jasmins ont mêlé leurs branches étoilées aux lianes en fleurs. La laine de l'été caresse les fruits lourds. La grave volupté laisse traîner son voile au détour des allées. Là-bas, sur le chemin, pas un chant, pas un bruit, rien ne trouble la paix d'un bonheur qu'on écoute. Viens sentir les parfums sur le bord de la route et respirer mon âme éparse dans la nuit. Tropical night. My translation. The night is luminous. The night is tender and beautiful. The sun has obscured itself. The moon rests on the roses. A languor enters the very heart of things, and the tall black palms dream at the water's edge. The jasmines have mixed their star-studded branches with lianas in bloom. Summer's breath caresses the heavy fruit. The dense sensuality lets its long veil linger along the sinuous paths. Over there, on the way, not a song, not a sound. Nothing disturbs the peace of a joy we listen to. Come, Take in the fragrances at the road's edge and breathe in my soul, spread across the night. Thank you.
Wasn't that great? One more round of applause for Danielle. Well, good evening. It is my great honor to introduce our next reader for this evening, and I must admit that I am nervous as hell up here because over the course of the past 2 years when I was a student in this program, I developed a wee case of hero worship for Chris Lynch. And it turns out that that's not an all that uncommon occurrence. So I reached out to several other of his former students to ask for their thoughts on Chris as an author, as a teacher, as a human being. And after a few hours of crushing on him together, we decided to form the Lesley University Chris Lynch Fan Club. So I hear that he's working with 3 new mentees this semester, and there are even more students that are waiting in a growing queue for the experience. So the fan club is thriving. T-shirts are in development. Chris was born and raised in Boston, but today he splits his time between the States and Scotland. He earned an undergraduate degree in journalism from Suffolk University in the year before going on to earn his MA in writing at Emerson University. And it was there that Chris fell in love with writing for young people. But that's something that almost didn't happen. In his final semester of the program, he signed up for a children's writing class taught by Jack Gantos because, and I'm quoting an interview that I found on the internet here, it happened to fit my schedule. Well, I'm really glad that it did. Because in that final semester, Chris discovered a passion for writing middle grade and young adult stories. And for that, I suppose that we owe Mr. Gantos a huge debt of gratitude. And Chris's stories are brilliant. He's been paying the teaching thing forward since 2008 as a mentor in Lesley's own Writing for Young People program. A thoughtful, encouraging, and provocative teacher, Chris inspires his students to take up the mantle and write meaningful stories for young audiences. All one needs to do to see his passion and be infected by it is sit in on one of his seminars. So all you students out in the audience tonight, you have been warned. And as I said earlier, t-shirts are forthcoming. Over the past 25 years, Chris has written and published 43 novels, maybe more. He's so prolific, it's hard to keep up. In 1993, his debut novel, Shadowboxer, hit bookstores with critical acclaim and was named an ALA Best Book for Young Adults. A lot of his novels have been named ALA Best Books for Young Adults, actually, and quite a few more have received the Michael L. Prince Award for Excellence in Young Adult Literature. And is it any surprise? Only a true master of the craft could get us to empathize with unlikable characters, watch as they do, say, or think morally questionable things, and recognize ourselves in them. We cringe even as we understand, and that's what makes Chris's writing so brilliant. His gritty, unflinching, authentic explorations of the inner turmoil and emotional struggles of young men as they shed the innocence of childhood resonates deeply with his readers. His coming-of-age tales are rough-edged, hard to swallow, yet compelling and impactful. Again and again, Chris writes books that shatter the simplistically binary lens of good-bad, right-wrong that too many of us use to see the world. His characters are complex, multifaceted, and full of ambiguities that we all recognize within ourselves. And I think That's one of the things that draws young readers to his stories. Tonight's reading, I have no doubt, will pull us in, linger in our minds, and have us wanting more. Enough hyperbole. Chris Lynch.
I'm glad she toned it down. I felt like Jason at the beginning there. Can we dim this just a little bit? I'm going to probably read fast, one, because I'm going to come closer than usual, I think, to the limit. And two, because I'm listening to so many audiobooks on speed and a half that it's kind of my natural reading voice now. We'll have to come up with another hand gesture. Because I might get more unintelligible than usual when I read too fast, so maybe you can do, instead of the claw, we'll do a, huh? And then I'll slow it down. Right, also, for the students in the room, you might notice some flip-flopping between past and present. This is very much a work in progress. I'm ironing it out, but don't let this happen to you. The characters that you are going to meet here. Okay, very quickly. There's Ike. He's hardcore. He's the older brother. He's scarred. He's the obvious problem referred to in a couple of these pieces. There's his mother. She's good-hearted. She's bleeding heart, like hemorrhaging heart, liberal. Father, who's largely culturally indifferent, mildly bitter kind of a guy. There's Faye, the young sister, who's like, she's a fireball. She's what her mother would be if she had just balls. There's a grandfather. His name is, he calls himself Paps. You'll get him clearly if you think of Bernie Sanders if Bernie had more time for laughs. Now, Lewis is our main character. Lewis wants to know what's gone wrong, basically, with this society. He's going around asking that and asking that and asking that. He thinks he knows. He thinks it's everybody else, particularly his brother, who's a state trooper, who is the most obvious answer to that question. But I found out partly through the writing of this that I was dealing with an unreliable narrator. And if you know anything about me going on and on about unreliable narrators, it's kind of appalling that I didn't know that from the beginning. But yeah, he's naive, he's insulated, he's slightly spoiled, he's an armchair good guy. We might all know one or two of those. And there's a character who just makes a brief appearance in here. His name is James. For now, I'll just call him the tutor, and you will, I hope, know what I mean. The book's called Scar Tissue. Hate is a lack of imagination. Graham Greene. Chapter 1, Lessons. My father calls me pathologically optimistic. But still, if you see life failing to meet your high expectations, you have to ask, don't you? What happened to us? I ask as soon as my eyes are open. I passed out at the dinner table, and now I'm in bed. I fainted, a trauma sort of a thing. The day was awfully traumatic. You are awfully dramatic, says my little sister Faye. Who's us? Us, I say, all of us, the country, the world. What went wrong? We were going the right way. I know we were. We were all going the right way. So what went wrong with us? What the hell happened to us? Well, she says gently, or anyway, as gently as Faye can do gently. I don't know about us necessarily, but I can tell you what happened to you. If you want that, do you want that, Lewis? I want that, and I don't want that. I don't need it. I know what happened to me, and it's only important as a screenshot of what has happened to us. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about us. My father is a fisherman. Once he was a fireman. He quit, retired, or as he likes to say, they took it all away from him. My brother is a state trooper, an officer of the law. He likes to call himself a peace officer because he is also a laugh and a half. He's a motorcycle cop. He's also a motorcycle civilian. Ike likes bikes, but nobody likes Ike. That's not true either. I like Ike. And he has a smattering of other friends. And now, anyway, mostly cops or motorcycle types, or both. Noisemaker people. Probably for the best, because you can always hear them coming, and you want to hear these guys coming. Back in high school, nobody liked Ike. That's not really true either. For sure, there was plenty of no-like Ike to go around, and that was proven by his many scars and suspensions, which he acquired largely through fighting people. But even he will admit that he wasn't going around fighting everybody. By his own reckoning, Ike fought guys who were not a lot like Ike. Didn't look like him, didn't sound like him, didn't act like him, didn't think like him. In Ike's opinion, he was guilty of the crime of being Ike and nothing else. Curious, wouldn't you say? Curious is what Ike would say, and does say quite frequently. That's funny for two main reasons. One is that Ike does curious things on practically an hourly basis. The other is that the way he says the word curious. He pronounces it like there is no letter R in the middle. Curious. Because of the wormy, thick scars running diagonally across the front of his lips and the nerve damage that came along with them. Are they a them because of the two chops across his lips, or are they a the because it is clearly one good gash, interrupted by one mouthy mouth? Doesn't matter, probably, especially since Ike doesn't acknowledge the situation at all. Unless he's faking it, he doesn't even know he's got the minor impediment to his speech. Curious. I've never brought it up, and I never intend to. Because here's the thing, or a thing anyway, an important thing. No matter what other people think my brother is, what he may be, no matter what he may in fact be, he's always been something different to me, something better. Doesn't make other opinions wrong, though, and I know that. Can all these things be right at the same time? Probably. I don't know. My head hurts. We are not the same, however. Somehow we are very, very, very different. Numerous somehows. Like how he went to the public high school in town and I didn't. Like how, when he was growing up, we still lived in that town, which is actually a smallish city, but is and always will be a town, the town. Like how when he graduated, just about, from that school, it was as if the entire family graduated from the town. Within 1 month of the grand occasion when the family failed to witness Ike receiving his diploma because none of us went, because my brother himself couldn't be bothered, we had packed up the wagon train and moved ourselves 45 miles and as many stiles away, out of the town and onto the coast. Gotta think that's a pretty bad experience. A school life so gnarly that your entire family relocates at the end of it, just not to be reminded. My folks have always maintained that that's not what it was about. But it's hard not to notice that the way life has been for Faye and me compared to what like Ike experienced could hardly be incidental or accidental. Dad even changed careers altogether. The man went from fire to fish just like that. As for Ike, he barely seemed to notice. He moved out again a month after we moved in. He says now that he never even lived there. He did. He lived there for a month. You cannot rewrite parts of life, not even little parts. They all matter, and they all contribute to the whole of things. It was actually my mother's idea that I go. She's forcing him to go to a protest because he doesn't get involved enough. It was an idea I did not think of much at the time. I was setting in post-breakfast for a spell of reading and writing like I usually do. Unlike Ike, Faye and I have been homeschooled for the past several years, and to be honest, it has suited me fine all the way. I like to be home. If you have a decent home, why wouldn't you want to be there? I think it would be weird if I did not feel that way. It's been a lot of things, technically, blended together into our own thing. We've been non-schooled, virtual schooled, paired up schooled with actual schools, but mostly it's been homeschooling for us, and the schooler herself has been my mom. She's done a fine job of it, and all you need for the proof is the fact that I really like to be homeschooled. I really like to be home. Which is why I was protesting. I was protesting at being sent out to protest. I'm not a protester, Ma. I don't even get it mostly, the protest thing. Does anything ever come of it? Does anything ever happen? What's the point? The world, the country, the universe have all been doing just fine without my 2 cents so far, and there's no reason it won't continue doing fine without it. Doing fine, Louis? She yodeled at me as I tried to peacefully protest and wash my dishes. She says my name without the S at the end, like we were French. We are not. We are not French. I would prefer the S were pronounced. Doing fine? You look around at this moment in history and you see fine? Dear God, where have I been failing you all these years? You have not been failing me, I said, now getting a bit agitated on her behalf. I turned around and, leaning back against the sink, faced my surprisingly strident mother at nose's length. You've done a fine job, Ma. I'm plenty smart, and more importantly, I know how to keep getting smarter. I know how to learn, and wasn't it the point all along? Yes, but it means nothing if you are too timid or apathetic or spoiled to get out there and invest yourself in what is going on. We don't do this. We never do this, not like this. It had me jangling with nerves to the point where my hands were visibly pulsating. What is wrong with you, Ma? I asked, trying to lower the volume and the tension. What's wrong with both of you? Faye asked as she strutted towards the multigrain Cheerios for her breakfast. Well, Dad said, not really attempting to be helpful at all, what is wrong with your brother is that he thinks the world can just fix itself, no matter what the issue is. And what's wrong with your mother is that she thinks she or her designated stand-in can fix the world, no matter what the issue is. So, ironically, they both suffer from the same condition. Pathological optimism, Faye said lifelessly as she poured milk over the cereal. I just don't see the point of it all, I said. Kid's got a point, Dad said. No, he hasn't. Involvement is the point, Louis. Engagement is the point. This world is your world. You need to appreciate it and seize every opportunity to have a positive impact on it. I thought my education was the most important thing. Don't I have lessons in my diary this afternoon, Mother? You do have lessons this afternoon. Sometimes, though, there are even bigger lessons than the ones we plan out for you. There are lessons, important lessons, waiting for you out there in the wider society. I am giving you the afternoon off from lessons so that you can experience and participate in bigger things. Work at home till lunchtime, and then I want you to get out there and make yourself a presence at those bigger things. Bigger things that day revolved around being seen and, more importantly, being heard. My mother would normally be the one to go to something like this because this is exactly the type of mother, type of citizen that she is. She has like a swollen empathy gland or something that causes her to feel every bit of every pain or injustice that comes rambling by, whether it's addressed to her or not. This one, though, she had to miss because she had what must have been a very important doctor's appointment, possibly to have that gland situation looked into. Because it was not like her to stay away from a righteous demonstration for something as frivolous or selfish as routine medical treatment. What's going on with you, I asked, both because I was a little worried about my mother and because I wanted to change the subject. Nothing is going on with me. It's a checkup. Now, he goes to this protest, under protest, and it's a casserole protest where you bring the pans and you smash things together. He's furious on his way over, but furious in a different way from everybody else who's going there. He's furious because he has to go, and because he has to take the bus, and because his father wouldn't drive him. So he gets there and he's angry and he makes a lot of noise. But one of his brother's friends on duty recognizes him there at the protest and calls his brother, who is not entirely rational all the time, and he shows up and he pulls him out of it and he cracks his head. Which brings us to the tail end of that. Things got even more surreal when Ike gave me a lift back on his bike. It had completely slipped my mind that this was Tuesday, and Tuesday night was Ike comes to dinner night, no matter what happens during day Tuesday. This time, there is bleeding. The boys are bleeding, Dad says to Ma. Do you notice our boys are bleeding? Why are you bleeding, boys? Yeah, why are you bleeding, pig? Faye wants to know. She's talking to our brother, original name Isaac, nickname Ike, current nickname Spike. Faye's the youngest. Faye talks like that a lot of the time. She's going through an anti-authority phase. At least I think it's a phase. Because I feel like it, Ike says. Ike is the oldest. He talks like that most of the time. He personifies exactly what riles Faye up. He is unquestioned authority on legs and, much of the time, on wheels. Faye turns away from Ike, which she is happy enough to do, Then why are you bleeding, Louis? She asks me, expecting to get a more reasonable reply. It is a reasonable expectation. Police brutality, I say. It should be noted that I am bleeding from my forehead and my brother is bleeding from his knuckles. Can I have some frozen peas, please? Ike asks Ma. My hand's kind of aching. That boy of yours has a hard head on him. He's giving me too much credit. I was wearing a potato pot when he punched me. Ma goes to the freezer for a bag of peas while Dad mutilates a delicious-smelling chicken at the counter chopping block between the sink and the garbage bin. She drapes the bag gingerly over the hand of her firstborn, despite what that hand has done to her second. You didn't really do this by punching your brother in the head, did you, Isaac? Faye cannot restrain herself at this opportunity. No, Ma, it's just totally a coincidence that one shows up with a mangled hand. She points at Ike with 4 fingers, which is Faye's idea of emphatic, and this one shows up with a mangled head. She turns to where I sit right beside her and blows into my ear. I get the shivers, as intended. Hey, let's do a forensics thing and match the 2 injuries up to see if there's a Faye. Ha, Ike says, and it would be anybody's guess how much of that was admiration, mirth, or disgust. You're good, Faby baby, he says to her. You'll make a fine cop one day. The Faby baby thing is a salted poker in her eye. I'd rather make a fine corpse, she says, adding pig, just in case she hasn't been sufficiently expressive. Dinner, however, goes surprisingly well, but you won't see that. Chapter 2. There was a follow-up protest the following day. And this time, I did not need to be forced to go. Excuse me. It was a lot quieter, which was a good thing, since my head was still ringing from the first go-round. And it was a lot closer to home, too, so the bus issues would not be repeated. People were gathering in front of the mayor's second home, which was down on the shore, not far from where my father's fishing boat was. I had no idea whether the mayor was even there, but that was not the point. We were simply going to establish a presence to make a statement that there was nowhere to hide from what he was doing. In its way, it was the opposite of the previous day's protest. It was nearly altogether silent. People just milled about on the sidewalk along the front of the mayor's house, just peacefully being and being seen being. We were like a scene from the old movie The Birds, with us as the birds. I would have found it pretty intimidating if it was happening to me. But there was no sign anybody was even noticing us, until the unmistakable rumble of massed Harley-Davidsons came bearing down on us. And it became clear within minutes that this protest was not to last as long as the last one. The motorcycle cops dismounted like a posse of cowboys, barely reaching a full stop before wading into the stunned crowd. First one and then a second police van pulled up, and the police started rapidly selecting people to stuff inside. There was shouting and shouting back. There was some wordless howling and crying. But what was abundantly and intensely clear was that the mayor took his property seriously. We were bellowed at about trespassing and criminal intent and whatnot, and the next thing I knew, I was getting hog-handled like a rodeo beast, bundled in the direction of one of the wagons. Go home, Ike growled in my ear in his not off-duty voice. If you do not heed me, this gets a lot worse, I promise you. I may have been a little bit more committed than I had been before, but it turned out I was no braver. When he shoved me hard in the direction of home, I stumbled and staggered and spun just in time to see Ike and his pal Larry bronc-busting another guy twice as roughly, face first, into the back door of the van. While I was more than willing to flee, I had to come back for this. Please, Ike, I pleaded. I know him. Can you please? Ike turned crisply on me. In that case, he should get it worse. Fine, I said, canceling out everything I thought I knew about myself by attempting to dive into the wagon first. Clearly, I was new at this, because I made the mistake of diving in such a way that my scrotum area was left exposed to the angry brother behind me. I think it only took him one hand, maybe 2 fingers, to haul me back out and fling me to the ground, and I screeched like a seagull. Last chance, Ike barked, pointing at me as I scrambled to my feet. He then gave the other guy a vicious shove to get him on his way alongside me. We walked a block or so towards home before either of us spoke. "So," he said, "is that your good deed, savior move of the day? Rescue the black guy, pass go, collect whatever the going rate is?" Well, that wasn't what I was expecting. "No," I said indignantly, turning to my side to regard him properly. "I just figured, as we were acquaintances, and my brother was..." "We're what?" "Oh, come on," I said. "I get it that maybe you didn't need or want my help, but you don't need to mock me. I know you. You know me." "I do. You know I do." "I do? I know I do?" "You do," I said, exasperated. "I don't," he said. We were by now walking in stride, side by side, examining each other's eyes closely. Oh, dear God. Oh, for fuck's sake, what did I do? He started smiling enthusiastically, as if he could hear the horrors happening in my head. "What did I do? I am so sorry," I said finally. "Should I go back and put myself back in the paddy wagon?" he asked. I was not enjoying this one bit, but I sure was happy somebody was. "I am so sorry," I said. "Yeah," he said, "we covered that already. It's just that..." I wish I could shut up. I wish I could just stop. "I had a tutor, right, helping me prep for my SATs for a couple of weeks." "Uh-huh," he said, having no intention of helping me out with this. "Have you ever tutored?" I asked with such a squeaky desperation in my voice, I would only expect dogs to tune into it. We had reached the front door of my house. I padded back and forth from one foot to another like somebody who needed to pee really badly. I may have had to, but I could not tell. It was all involuntary, and I was numb both from the waist down and the shoulders up. "You know, I never had," he said genially, pointing at my chest for some reason, "but I'm sure I could school you, my friend." "Louis," I said, sticking out my hand, like I wanted him to take it and keep it. "James," he said, doing the same thing, but a lot more calmly. A week passes. They're actually trying to make this work. And in walks his grandfather at the tail end of this tutoring session. My grandfather knows everything, which I think is too much. As soon as he entered the room, Paps walked toward James with his hand extended. "I haven't had the pleasure," he said, as they shook. "I'm Leonard, Louis's grandfather." James said, shaking and smiling warmly. "Paps," I said, "you have met James before. He's my tutor. You came by one afternoon about a month ago. I'm still trying to sell this to myself, by the way. He's helping me prep for my SATs." I gave James a pleading look, one he probably recognized well already, and hoped he wouldn't expose my idiocy to my grandfather. Paps swiveled his head in James's direction, then back in mine, looking puzzled. The old man is sharp, but sometimes can get a little iffy with the recall stuff. Mostly, I think he plays it for laughs, like when he claims to have fought in the Pacific in World War II rather than in Vietnam, which was the actual story. My mother, his daughter, the bleeding heart, got all provoked, as intended, accusing her dad of getting confused about the difference between one Asian war and another. He said he did have the last word because he explained that he merely confused himself with his father. So there. But now I'm not so sure. "Don't cause a fuss, Paps, please," is what I'm thinking. "What are you trying to pull?" Paps says. "This is an entirely different person here." "Ha," James said, rising and clapping his hand one time like they are sharing a joke. "They are, and it's me." "I'll leave you two to it," James said, clapping me on the shoulder. "This was a good beginning. You have some potential, and despite everything, you have a good heart. Remember, though, a good heart is just a start." "I will remember," I said. "Next week?" "Next week," he said. Paps interjects, "You are a completely different person, right?" James, "I like to think so, yes." And with that, he left. "I thought you were at the bar, Paps." "I just finished up. I wanted to see the kid." "Me?" "Yeah." "How's the noggin?" "Still dented." "It'll fill in." He runs his thumbs all over my dented head. He loves me, which I like, because of his greatness. He runs a small juice bar near the bus station, in quotes, feeding soft drinks to 12 steppers who are all hangover and no buzz. He changes what I'm supposed to call him frequently. Paps, Pappy, Papillon, Papaya, Papadum. Whatever pap word has caught his attention most recently, that's what I have to call him. The day he heard about papilloma, that was a long day. For these things and many more, I must listen to what this man says when he wants to tell me something. He stared at the door for a while after James had gone through it. Then he spoke. Louis, I would love your mother dearly, he said. I waited. No connections were coming to me. Okay, I said. But, he added, it's easy, boy, to be anti-racist like your mother. You want to really get your back into it? Try being unracist for a while. He hardly even looked back at me before pivoting in a very ungrandfatherly way and gliding away. He left me, and not for the first time, stewing in my own juices. He was big on the juices, stewing. So I sat, so I stewed, and I realized he was right. Not about me, but broadly and probably right. Thank you.